Welcome, fertility sisters, to the Tru Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Leah Nicole Trujillo, a wife, mom, and therapist turned fertility coach after a challenging 7-year journey to conceive. Join me for stories from those who've walked this path, tips for your fertility and IVF journey, and some fertility-related girl talk. So let's sprinkle some of that baby dust because it's time for Tru Fertility. For many of us, struggling with infertility is the most challenging thing we have ever gone through in life. But is it the scariest? Maybe. This 12th season of American Horror Stories, titled Delicate, explores that concept as it takes one woman's IVF journey and plays on the fears that I and so many women experience through this process in the series' traditional creepy style. As I personally am a huge fan of all things horror, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to dish on this show as it combined two big interests of mine. Join me and Abbe Feeder, fertility coach and actress, to explore part one of Delicate American Horror Stories. We'll break down the real-life accuracy of the show, both medical and emotional, themes and symbolism, our predictions, and of course, Kim Kardashian's acting. This will be a fun one, so stay with me, guys. Now, before we get started with today's episode, I wanted to offer my listeners an opportunity to snag my free class, Triple Your IVF Success with Less Stress. Inside this free masterclass, you'll receive 2 simple tools that you can start on today that have been proven to triple your success rates when trying to conceive. These tools not only help you boost your fertility, but also help you feel better now. So if you're looking to get your baby in your arms faster, reduce the number of IVF rounds, and ultimately save money, time, and energy, this is the tool for you. Go to www.leahnicolecoaching.com, that's LEANICOLE, coaching.com to grab this free class while it's available. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Tru Fertility Podcast. Yo! I am so excited about today's episode. I am here today with none other than the amazing Abbe Feeder. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love this idea.
Yes, me too. I'm so excited to have her here because she is a pioneer in the field of supporting women through fertility. And honestly, despite her success, she is super down to earth and approachable and friendly and open. So I just really appreciate Abbe being here today to talk about such a fun and interesting topic, though, too.
Oh, I love you for saying that. Thank you. I think you and I both know that there will never be a shortage of people who need our help and support. So the more of us there are, the more we can help people, the more people we can help. So thank you for saying that. It's very sweet.
Well, it's so true. In case you guys don't know Abbe, she is a certified life and fertility coach. She is the founder of In Circle Fertility, where she holds the hearts and hands of those struggling to build their families. And she's also the host of the Fertility Chick podcast and mama to 5-year-old twins through IVF.
You know it, baby. They were lucky number 8 round of IVF.
Oh my goodness. I know. And I got to see actually her story, which is outlined in another podcast that she shared with her husband. And super brave because she was one of the first people to really put her full story out there in such detail. And so again, I really appreciate how much you've given to this community and how vulnerable you've been throughout your journey.
Thank you for saying that. So sweet. And same to you. You exude love and that's what we need more of. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Well, before we get into today's topic, which again, I'm super excited to break down everything about the series Delicate of American Horror Stories, which has a huge focus on fertility and the IVF process. But before we get there, I wanted to get to know Abbe on a little bit deeper level. And
Great.
to do that, we're going to do a rapid fire round of some fun icebreaker questions with Abby.
I love that.
Yes. Okay, so question number 1. What was your dream job as a kid?
Actress, actress, actress. Always wanted to be an actress. Came out of the womb as an actress. Lot of acting. And my grandmother was like a very big local actress in her neighborhood. My mother wanted to be an actress. She never ended up pursuing it. But my parents were like, you can pursue acting, but you have to go to college for something real. And I'm really glad I did, because I did study behavioral science, which has come in very handy for my current work. But I did go to drama school, moved out to LA, which is where I live now, to pursue acting. And I still dabble in it every now and then. But more importantly, I met my husband, who's a filmmaker, and we just have an understanding of sort of the showbiz life and what it's like. So yeah, always an actress.
I love that. So it's just totally in your blood and you're running through your veins. And
Yes.
I love how you just went out and pursued it right off the bat. A lot of people have these dreams, but they tell themselves maybe that's not going to be in the cards for them. But I love that you just went ahead and actually did the thing that you wanted to do when you were a child.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Thank you. I always wanted to know, and I feel the same way about my fertility journey, like that I did everything I could to pursue it and never regretted not turning over a certain corner.
That's what life's all about, right? Living, trying to live with the least amount of regrets as possible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so next question I have for you is a little bit more serious, but as I mentioned before, you put yourself out there fully and shared all aspects of your IVF journey, in a time where not as many people were as open with their journey as they are now. But how scary was it to document your IVF journey in all its glory? And how did you come to that decision?
Such a good question. What made it not scary was that we didn't know what it was going to turn into. So we recorded everything, and then it realized that we had a story to share. It was more that we sort of found a need for a default therapist, because all of our people close to us were saying the wrong thing, and we were just like constantly hurt and angry and upset, and only had each other to talk to about it, and even had couples therapy at some point and didn't feel like it was doing what we needed it to do. And so we were like, it was when podcasting was just getting started, and a friend was like, if you think you might have a story, just grab a recorder. And so we were like, that makes no sense, but let's just try it. And so we tried it, and it felt so good to have this almost default person that couldn't respond to us in the recorder. And we could just be totally open and honest and, like you said, vulnerable. And so it felt like more of a release than, okay, what's our story going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And then about 3 or 4 months into recording is when we met with producers, and they were like, we definitely have something here. And so then we continued on, but we had already been so open and put so much out there that it didn't feel so scary. We were just kind of used to it.
Yeah. Well, good for you. That sounds almost similar to like when people journal, like
Yeah.
their experiences or their feelings, but you just expressed it in a verbal form, essentially, right?
Yeah, it's someone I was talking with somebody who works in mental health last night, and she said something that actually really is relevant and stuck with me, which was that journaling is great, but sometimes she feels like it doesn't count if nobody bears witness to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what it felt like to do this recording. Even though it wasn't a real person, it felt like somebody was bearing witness to it. And then when we knew so many other people, as we started opening up, were going through it, we felt like all of them needed somebody to bear witness to it. And that's what this would serve as. Because journaling, and I'm all for it, but it's so just as isolating as living in infertility. So this was a way to feel like we were doing something part of a bigger group. Even
Mm-hmm.
though all it was a silly recorder, we just knew that it could land in the ears of people who needed to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's really all about finding what's going to work best for you and what is going to be the therapeutic tool that speaks to you.
Exactly.
So I love that you were, again, more brave enough to,
Thank
and it's
you.
one thing to record, and then it's another thing to click the publish button, right?
Totally.
So, good on you guys for
Thank you.
having the bravery within to share your story with everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Felt really good.
All right. And last question for Abby before we get into the meat of our show today is, since we're talking about a scary show, I have to know, what is your all-time favorite scary movie?
Oh my gosh. The first one that comes to mind is The Shining, because that's just like an OG first one that really scared the crap out of me, like real thriller, real creepy, and not necessarily gory, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
I also Paranormal Activity, the original one, in the theater I saw it, scared the living crap out of me. And if I can add one more, the original Blair Witch Project was given to me in college. I'm dating myself now, but like towards the end of college, somebody had it on VHS and they were like,
Wow.
"Oh, my friend interned at this documentary company this summer. This is what they produced." And they handed us the video. We all slept with the lights on in our living room instead of in our bedrooms after we saw it, the Blair Witch Project, because we thought it was actually real. And then when it came out in theaters, we were like, what? So I think those are like my top three that really genuinely scared the crap out of me before I knew anything about this genre.
Wow. That is such a cool story about the Blair Witch. I mean, yeah, how would you know otherwise? It looks so legitimate.
Yeah. And it was like
like
on a VHS tape. I was like, oh, somebody just gave this tape to my friend. Let's put it in, you know?
wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy. But those are
Yeah.
some great movies. And
What
I
about
see that.
you?
So for me, my first in the movie theater experience that scared the shit out of me was The Ring, actually. That was my
Mm.
time period. I remember being in high school, I went to the movie theater and I saw The Ring and I was like, oh my gosh, the scene where she's coming through the TV and comes out of it, that was the all-time scariest part of the movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, same thing, went home. And I'm a person who absolutely loves like scary horror like genre. I went all through as a child. I read like scary novels all the
So
time.
funny.
Like
Yeah.
since middle school, it's like Goosebumps, R.L. Stein, like everything. So I know the general like themes of scary movies. And actually, last night I just watched Exorcist, the new one,
The new one?
the I can't even remember, Believer, I think it's called now. I give it maybe 3 stars. But of
Okay.
course, the original Exorcist,
Yeah.
such great buildup. I was just talking with my husband about it last night. I feel like the buildup was a lot better in that one versus the current one. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
like you, it's not always for me about the gore or, the actual imagery. It's about, again, the suspense and the buildup in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, like more modern thrillers, horror movies, we have such shorter attention spans than we all used to. And so the buildup can't necessarily be as long and big because we have to kind of get to it or people lose interest. So, I think some of these movies like The Shining, I haven't seen it in years, but I don't know if it would even hold up today because it might be boring at this point. So they're always thinking of like new ways to scare you, which I think is helpful, but it doesn't always like give that long drawn out build up, you know?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's just today's society.
Yeah,
But
it is.
yeah. Well, let's go ahead then and transition and get into delicate American horror stories. Just so you guys are clear, just a little warning here. If you have not seen this, there's definitely going to be some spoilers given throughout our discussion today. The second little warning I want to put out there is the show is pretty graphic and can be unsettling. And so, if you are currently in the midst of an IVF cycle, you may want to wait on watching the show because even somebody who, is not currently in that process and hasn't done that in a few years, it kind of at certain points made my stomach turn and made me feel like, ugh, yeah.
Same,
So,
same.
just wanted to put that out there for any listener, again, who has not seen the show yet. So let's kind of just open it up with just your overall impression of the show. What did you think about it overall?
So I'll tell you, I've never really watched any of the American Horror Story theme shows, partly because it's like a lot of creepiness and gore, like you said, which is not generally what I love about it. But I was so excited to be like, this was such a great idea. And I was so excited to be doing this with you that I really got into it. Overall, I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought Emma Roberts was very good. I think you and I, and we'll get to this, like can go super deep on some of the symbolism that was there for the fertility perspective. I did think Kim Kardashian did better than I thought she would. But I will
Same.
say that, like, watching her, I thought she did great. If I was, like, in the other room brushing my teeth just listening to it, I did not think she was as good. Because you could hear when you weren't, like, watching her, you could, like, hear her reading the lines on the page kind of thing. But, I mean, Emma Roberts is, like, an award-nominated actress, and I felt like for them to carry on in scenes together, they did a pretty good job. I don't
Yeah.
know. Let's hear your overall.
Yeah, well, I guess I agree with you. I think I love Emma Roberts. I actually have seen other episodes of American Horror Story or other seasons, I guess. Not all of them, but some of them. I think sometimes it gets very off track and starts going into, we think it's about a certain topic and then all of a sudden it adds in like vampires when we were talking about ghosts.
Right.
And so it
Right.
gets a little too cheesy sometimes for me. But I really liked this season because it's very focused, at least at this point. Mind you, there's only 5 episodes at this point because we watched part 1. But at this point, again, in time, they've been pretty on track with the storyline. There hasn't been any like craziness added on. So I appreciate that. It's a little more realistic in that sense. But I really love the fact that they are, talking about IVF. I feel like this is really saying IVF and fertility struggles is really now mainstream. It's really given it that almost like official check mark in a way. So kudos to that because I do feel like obviously our cause is getting a lot more attention now. But overall, my thoughts were that it really just amplified some of the fears and struggles that women trying to conceive and going through this process are experiencing. So it takes it and it just really ramps it up to the point where it becomes a horror movie or horror show.
Yes.
So that's my overall kind of impression of it.
I agree. I think there are things that you and I might have read into more, and I'm not sure that they were intentionally fertility focused or it's just because we're looking at everything with that lens on. Like, I mean, we can get more into the plot points, but just some of the external things that they brought in, the mother-in-law storyline, like I think we could go deep on like, we feel like the husband finds everything else more important when all we find important is the fertility journey. I don't know if that was the intention, but I definitely could see it through that lens when we were looking at it with a reason to talk about it through the fertility lens,
Oh, yeah,
And
definitely.
like, I did think they did a really good job of the medical piece of it, most of it. Like in the first 1 or 2 episodes where they're setting up the process of going through IVF, I think they were really pretty dead on and pretty clear, concise. Like I was thinking to myself, like, did they have a consulting producer that went through infertility? Because then there was just one little thing that they did that was not accurate that I was so annoyed by, which is her 2-week wait, which if you've been through infertility, it's not really 2 weeks. It's like 10 days, sometimes 11, sometimes 9, was like marked on her calendar for full 14 days. And I was like, nobody that they're talking to who's been through a 2-week wait would let them get away with a 14-day, 2-week wait, which is like, insignificant, but it made me feel like they paid so much attention to so many details. Why did they let that one go?
And that's funny you bring that up because actually I didn't catch that one, but you're absolutely right. I remember the scene where she had the calendar and it was, exactly 2 weeks, which obviously most of the time it's 10 days.
Right.
But something else I noticed too is, again, after the transfer, immediately, like a day later, she's throwing up. And it's like, that's
right.
very uncommon. Like,
Right.
I don't know, maybe the smallest percentage of women, I don't even know if that's possible, honestly,
Right.
would get nauseous immediately following a transfer. That's a later down the line pregnancy symptom. So
Totally.
if you are, fresh out of your transfer and you're thinking to yourself, wait, Anna threw up as a pregnancy symptom, why aren't I? Do not be stressed about that. That it would not normally happen. So
totally. Good
a little
point.
bit of a difference there. And then also, I would say something else. Oh, another accuracy point that I thought was a little off, but yet I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the accuracy of this because in the show, Anna, again, is supposed to have her transfer. It's already scheduled for a Friday. She then has to change the date. I'm sorry, she had it scheduled for a Thursday.
Thursday, that's right. I remember now.
She then got the opportunity to go on the Andy Cohen show and then called her doc and said, hey, I'm going to change it to Friday, actually.
Right.
Which in the real world, again, we have specific windows for, when your uterine lining is going to be most receptive to that embryo based on the timing of progesterone that you've taken. And so, again, she would likely miss that window if she delayed it a whole day.
Right.
So I don't think most doctors would allow her to get away with that. And
the doctor, I feel like, if I remember, was trying not to let her get away with it, but she insisted. And, the rest is history. But you're very right.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think there were definitely a lot of factual information about the process of it. Another thing that the doctor said that was accurate, or the show said that was accurate, was that 30% of couples that are struggling with fertility issues are due to unexplained infertility. And that is an accurate statistic. It's about 15 to 30% of the time it is due to an unexplained fertility diagnosis. So that was another fact that was accurate.
Yes. And just like the way that the front desk would call her, and it would be a little bit frustrating, and it was never with the real doctor. It felt like what it feels like to go through a lot of that administrative BS. And I thought it was like a good detail for them to add in,
Totally. And I think also, and again, this is a little bit heightened, but keeping up with the schedule of the IVF process, they really showed how overwhelming that was. And again, magnified it to a degree, but that's not to say that, again, it's not overwhelming, because there's so many appointments to keep track of. Her using a calendar and trying to keep everything organized is totally common, and happens to most women just because of the number of appointments and, again, all the timing of all the procedures that need to take place.
Right. And also having to rearrange your life to make appointments fit or change appointments, which, I think there is an air of the clinic or doctor just assumes whatever you tell them, you're going to make it work. And when you are living that glamorous life that Anna is living, she can't always make it work, or she has to choose, right? And she talks about that a little bit. And so in some ways she's able to fit it all in and do both, but it's torturous for her. So I don't know if it's really a win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it hit the nail on the head on that, in the fact that you're trying to balance your whole life plus add this in. And in the aspect of balancing her life, she does, obviously have a lot of stress going around the, situation with trying to win an Oscar, campaigning, being present on social media, and all of the whims that come with being a celebrity. But something else that the doctor said that I don't want to miss in this episode is that once she was pregnant, he was like, how are we going to make sure that this guy sticks around? That's what he said.
Yeah.
And he said, we need to eat healthy. Yes, great advice. He said, yeah, do some moderate physical activity. Yeah, that's pretty standard too, right? But the last thing he said, and he really emphasized this, was the need to avoid stress at all costs, which again is not fully accurate.
It's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And it's such an important point you're making, because so many of the people we work with are so stressed about how stressed they're going to be. Or they'll say, I should move this whole cycle. If that were Anna and Anna were my client, she'd probably have said, well, if I'm going to do an Oscar campaign, I should probably just not transfer till we're done with that. There is no perfect time, and lots of stressed people do get pregnant. I'm not advocating for you to stress yourself out, but it's sometimes just out of your control. And the stress about that stress is far worse than what it would be without it.
That's very true. When we're talking about stress reduction and helping our odds, that's going to more come in the forefront of things,
Right.
you know? So we're going to work. And obviously, yes, once you are pregnant, we want to maintain a lower level of stress in general because we want you to feel good. You know, we want to have that environment, you know, happy place for your baby to grow and develop. It affects things like epigenetics, things like that. But if you're not going to have a miscarriage because of everyday typical stress.
Right.
So I think that's something just to kind of make sure that you fully understand. The doctor, again, it's supposed to amplify some of our fears,
Yes.
but that's not really accurate. I mean, we're talking like life-changing, huge traumatic events might cause you to go into like early labor, something like that might cause your baby to be at harm. But typical everyday, what Anna is experiencing, even though it was a stressful situation, she would not, you know, be at risk of losing her baby.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think the doctor was giving her so much of the stress too that it was ironic. He was saying to her, stop stressing. And he was the one that was causing it, you know? And I think that was kind of on purpose because I do feel like it's like us following the rules. Well, the doctor says not to, but I am. And it was like he was the one giving it to you and he's also the one giving you the rules.
Yeah. I think also with that too, when speaking about the doctor and the realistic nature of the show, there was another part in which, let's talk a little bit about the scene. First off, there's two things. It's very graphic and it was unsettling. But I'm talking about this scene specifically where she's getting her ultrasound by a new nurse that she does not know, which again, I feel like that is something that does happen to us.
Totally.
When we're going through IVF. Again, it's just almost feels like sometimes just never ending.
Like a rotating door of people who are supposed to be helping you. And it's like intimate stuff you're doing.
Yes, yes. So again, like not knowing or not having that familiar face every time you go in and get a checkup, it's somebody new. And unfortunately, you know, she happened to have a new nurse. She didn't know. And then that nurse gave her the ultrasound, which ended up, the wand was, you know, bloody, gory, and she proceeded to what we thought have a miscarriage at that point in time. So again, like the goriness of that kind of really plays on your worst fear that somehow these exams are going to hurt your baby, something like that.
Right. And the reality is, as my doctor said to me, there's nothing you can do to fuck it up, basically. Falling short of like smoking crack and falling down 2 flights of stairs. That's literally what she said to me. But I did think it was a good way for them to show the magnification that we think every little thing we do is what's going to be the issue, what's going to cause the miscarriage, what's going to fuck up our babies for the rest of our lives or their lives. And it was very heightened, and it did turn out to be something that was wrong, but not because the nurse used the wand to hurt the baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that it was something called vanishing twin syndrome. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, that's another thing I guess we forgot about, is that accurate? And it actually is a real thing.
It's a real thing. Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah. And there's, you know, there's not a ton of data on it because it's unclear exactly at what point if you're that early in pregnancy, it happens. But also because of the name vanishing twin, it sounds like something that's made up and not real. But it is real. And I actually know people who it's happened to. Some knew they had two and some didn't even know that they had two until one vanished, which is also crazy.
Yeah. As you just said, it's a real medical condition. I don't think, from what I understand, you would have like an extreme amount of blood loss. Typically, people report just kind of some lighter spotting and such. And of course, you would have a heartbeat of the remaining twin, which in the episode, there's no heartbeat, which again leads us to think it's a full miscarriage rather than, you know, a vanishing twin situation.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure, like, I don't know about having no heartbeat and then all of a sudden you hear one and it turns out to be a vanishing twin. I don't know if that's realistic.
Yeah. But again, it really plays into our fears. And I know I've personally had this fear is when I'm getting checked. What if that medical equipment is defective?
Right.
And they think that I'm having a miscarriage and they don't hear a heartbeat, but I'm not.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened with Anna is, again, she's concerned that that's a misdiagnosis. And I think that's a legit fear that a lot of us have.
Yes. And I would say I felt like she played it extremely realistically because I think when we are experiencing miscarriage, at least for me, I kept thinking like I'm going to wake up tomorrow and it's not going to be real. The baby's going to be back because these are the things we do in our head. And so I felt like when she was like, no, I'm sure it's in there. I'm sure it's like, there were times, I mean, I literally was like waiting to miscarry it took weeks and weeks. And I was like, one day I'm going to wake up and the heartbeat's going to be back. And so I was a little annoyed, like it was a little convenient then that the heartbeat was back and it turned out to be a vanishing twin. But of course, that affected the whole storyline. So I understand why they did it. Because for the moment before we knew that's what it was, I felt like they were doing a really good job of some of the mental torture we put ourselves through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And aside from just like the medical equipment not working, I've also worried in the past, like with my, like a chemical pregnancy, maybe they switched my blood results and I
Right.
actually still have doubled my HCG. And now they're telling me to stop my meds and I'm going to lose the baby so totally legitimate, realistic fears that a lot of women really have. And I feel like they did a great job capturing that aspect
Agree.
of it. Yeah. Talking about other fears that women have when trying to conceive. In the first episode, they really laid out a lot of very, I want to say almost stereotypic, but yet still realistic thoughts that a lot of women had. They kind of just really said it instead of necessarily acting it out too much. Like, for instance, are you still going to love me if I'm broken?
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, super realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly had that thought as well, as I'm sure many women do. And worrying again, are you going to be enough for your spouse if for some reason this doesn't work out the way that you're hoping it does?
Right. And even along those lines, more of a spoiler, but she thinks that the husband is cheating. And I have seen people go through that torture of like convincing themselves that their husband or partner is going to cheat because their body is quote unquote broken. Or I've seen women say, we should just get divorced and he should go be with somebody else because that person will be able to give them children and that's something that he wants. So I also felt like that was a good example of them magnifying something that we do think about while we're going through this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point on that one. Just adding on, like thinking maybe they're going to cheat and everything.
Mm-hmm.
She also, in that kind of earlier episodes, is sharing verbally, what if this cycle doesn't work? And she even says something like, it shouldn't be this hard to get your body to do something that you tried to prevent it to do from like 18 to 30.
Right.
Which again,
we've all felt.
Yeah, definitely. Going forward or talking a little bit more about fears and such is, and we touched on this a little bit before, is, working with the medical professionals. But they also talked about not only just the doctor and the ultrasound, but they even talked about having a physical therapist and really anyone, I guess, kind of in that personal space, in that zone when you're trying to conceive. And she obviously starts getting really freaked out and really anxious about what that physical therapist is doing to, potentially that might hurt her baby in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was honestly surprised. They called it a pelvic floor therapist, I think, in the episodes.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. I've actually never known anyone to go to pelvic floor therapy during pregnancy. So I'm sure people do. And I'm sure if you're trained in how to work with pregnant women in this way, it's fine. But then when they showed her going, she was on like a Pilates reformer.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly almost got like a trigger from that because I'm like, don't use your core, don't use your abs, don't, because these are the things we're told, especially in IVF, even though it's fine. And if your body's used to it, it's fine. I felt like if they're trying to be so accurate, maybe they would skip the reformer. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
show her doing prenatal yoga or something like that. Great. But the reformer I felt like was a little bit off, not to go back to accuracy talk, but I felt like it was just a little bit off.
Yeah, very
What'd you
true.
think? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of anyone who, first off, has had a pelvic floor exam. Honestly, that I'm starting just to learn about that. And yeah, it is used prior to help with people who have a very difficult
Totally.
time relaxing enough to their vaginal muscles enough to go through the IVF process. But yeah, during pregnancy seems a little
Yeah.
strange.
No, and it's a good point you make. Like, I'm only also now just learning about how pelvic floor therapy for fertility can be so beneficial. Had I
Mm-hmm.
known when I was going through it, I'm sure I would have tried it.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be incredibly beneficial, but I have never seen it during pregnancy, especially early pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. And even her getting to that point of the recommendation of using a pelvic floor therapist, I thought it was interesting before she got there because the doctor essentially was gaslighting her, medically
Yes.
gaslighting her and her symptoms, which I thought was really interesting. What I mean by that is he was telling her she was complaining of pregnancy symptoms that were very, painful. And yet he was very dismissive of her.
Yes.
Like, oh, it's normal. What do you expect? I mean, you're carrying a baby. Oh, a little rib pain, get over it type of
Totally.
thing. Yeah.
And we see that he's pretty old school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it makes sense that that was sort of again magnified
Mm-hmm.
it as and reflected back as what the reality is, that we are often dismissed, especially by more old school male white doctors. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
reality. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that they made that point.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the next part that I wanted to talk about is also like getting back to the scariness of the show almost. Aside from just kind of amplifying the fears, there was also a lot of more like graphic nature. And we talked about the miscarriage or potential what we thought was a miscarriage scene. First off, lots of blood and gore on that one.
Lots of blood and gore in general. And this is something, because I'm married to a filmmaker, that I'm very aware of that probably most people aren't, which is when, of course, blood, but like, I don't know if you noticed in terms of color scheme, like she was always wearing neutral light colors. Kim Kardashian's character was always wearing neutral dark colors. And anytime something bad was about to happen or happening, it was in red. Now, red is a little bit obvious because blood and pregnancy, like that makes sense. But the lipstick that kept appearing on her hands was red. The writing on the mirror was red lipstick. When she gets that like doomsday, she gets a package in the mail from her producer, and she's like, she's kind of hiding out. So he's not supposed to have her address.
Mm-hmm.
It's a red apple and a red bottle, like a champagne with a red label and red flowers. And so I am just trained. This is a curse and a blessing of being married to a filmmaker, to know that like if they're using color specifically throughout, they're trying to tell you something specific about what's going on. The woman who she keeps being creeped out by has like sunglasses with a red rim, all these things. And the doctors are wearing dark red, like burgundy uniforms. So
Wow.
yeah. And once you kind of know, you'll start to see it in so many things where like it could be good, it could be bad, it could be like they're trying to have like one good person in a sea of bad people. All
Mm-hmm.
the people's clothes will be based on blue, and then the one good person, it'll be green. Like they're trying to differentiate between storylines and characters. And so when that giant box came and everything was red, I was like, oh, that's from somebody not good. Like you just know?
Wow. That is so perceptive. I didn't think of that before. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for like
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, another gory aspect or scene is in the initial opening aspect of the episode, where again, she's in her nightgown, and then all of a sudden it looked like initially like a lot of blood loss everywhere. And that's kind of one of our worst fears, is after an embryo transfer to just see a lot of blood. That's like the worst, the last thing that we want to see. Yeah, so lots of definitely bloody images.
Well, the gore
There,
and the goriest part for me was the animal.
yes.
And I don't know if you want to talk about that separately or now, but like
No, that's exactly where I was going
I
next.
was really traumatized. Like I was so repulsed by she finds a dead animal that looks like it has maggots in its stomach.
Mm-hmm.
She does other crazy crap with the animal that we don't even have to get into, but at some point she like cannot resist picking up this animal and taking a bite out of its like stomach area with maggots, and I was so violently repulsed. It was very hard for me to watch. Like that's where it crosses a line for
Oh,
me.
yeah, definitely. And just kind of seeing again the flesh coming off and the oozing of it. Yeah, it was a lot.
And that for me was a little bit of them bringing in something else weird because they do continue to have a storyline about it, but it kind of was not necessary, I felt like.
Yeah. I mean,
Right?
I guess it's just that I still didn't understand why she felt the need to take a bite out of it. I
Yeah.
could understand the aspect of her, with her loss, kind of maybe feeling like I'm going to baby this
Yes.
animal and treat it like my own baby in a way. I could see that. But again, the need to bite it was just a little extra for no reason that I could
Totally.
understand at this point, at least. But yeah. The image that really got me actually was one that's a little more mild, yet it really struck something inside me. And this was actually in the first episode where she's walking out of her apartment and she sees a nest that's on the floor or on the ground.
Yes.
And inside that nest are little broken eggs, and they were just, bloody. It looked like little dead birds possibly in there. And it just really screamed to me old eggs, old
Mhm.
broken, non
Yes.
useful eggs.
Yes. And that's the kind of thing where I definitely noticed that too. And I think they go back to it once or twice
Mm-hmm.
after the initial one, but where I don't know if, well, it also was like symbolized for me dead baby. The nest fell, meaning it wasn't stable. Maybe her womb's unstable. And I was like, am I reading so far into this because that we've been through IVF and loss, or is that what they want you to think, or is it just a coincidence? And there's no right answer. I just, yeah, it was very symbolic, and I appreciated the symbolism that they chose for a lot of the things.
I totally agree. It is specific to what your personal struggle with fertility is. But for me, I have diminished ovarian reserve. And so for me, that was like really triggering
And that's so
personally.
interesting because you have diminished ovarian reserve and you saw dead or broken eggs.
Mm-hmm.
I saw dead or broken babies. To me, it was like about more the loss than the
Mm-hmm.
actual egg. So
Mm-hmm.
it is through which filter are you looking through when you're watching, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I now want to transition to a little bit more of the fun stuff about this
Yes.
show. Let's talk a little bit more about the lighthearted again aspects of it. So we talked a little bit about Kim K and her acting here, which I thought again, I've seen her in other shows. I've obviously seen some of her actual like reality TV shows, and I felt like she did such a better job with her acting here than anything I've ever seen her
I
in.
agree.
She
I
she
agree.
was a lot more believable, and I felt like this role really fit her. She could
Yes.
surprisingly pull this one off, even though from what I understand in real life, she's a little more like laid back and calm natured from at least what she gives us on her reality TV show.
Mhm.
But her playing Siobhan as like this bitchy, very driven woman, she did a great job for her, I feel like.
I really
And
agree.
was very believable. I loved some of her lines in this. I think they did a good job of being a little fun and lighthearted with her role. She said something like, "Do you know how many, like asking Anna to be grateful for where she got her to on the Oscar
Yes.
campaign? Like, do you know how many BJs were given collectively
Yes.
to get you here?"
Right.
Which I don't know much about Hollywood,
Yeah.
but I
Probably
maybe,
true.
yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I got a little bit of that behind the scenes, behind the curtain, possible real life aspect to all of the things that are at play and go behind somebody trying to catapult their career, essentially.
Absolutely. It might not be really blowjobs. It might, but it might not. But it's definitely, the campaigning is a whole full-time job for the person, the PR person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really, really liked that episode where they had the two Ashleys come in.
Yes.
And they're the PR, cleanup queens. This is after, again, Anna kind of embarrasses herself and throws up in front of I think it was the Golden Globes audience.
Yes.
And they come in, the Ashleys. And I'm sure, again, there probably are PR specialists out there who are
definitely.
The cleanup crew, basically. And I just thought their campaign and their solution was making a reel.
Totally.
And I thought that was so funny.
And then they show the reel that they made. And I thought it was also so funny and so accurate, right? Like, it was totally produced, totally not organic, like a set of extras to get her out of this PR hole. And it works. Yeah. And that does happen,
Yeah. And I loved it. What did she say? I have a period, deal with it. Like, just all of these, like, I fart, deal with it. Like, it was just it was so ridiculous, but it was also very funny.
Yes.
And I just thought I liked how they infused some lightheartedness into, again, such a serious and, essentially real life scary topic. Also, we talked a little bit about some symbolism, but we haven't really touched on some of the main scary, I guess, so perceived, at least at this point, scary characters in the show. One being Miss Preacher. I think that's what they're calling her. Preacher speaks, Miss Preacher. Mm-hmm. And then also there's those ladies who are completely in black.
Who, by the way, I think are the two Ashleys. Same actresses, like on purpose.
Oh,
I think.
Okay. Wow.
I think.
Okay.
At one point, they do a close-up of their faces.
Yes.
In the all black. And then,
You're right.
The next scene, there are the Ashleys, and I think it was meant to be that's who they are.
Wow.
I think. We'll go back and check.
Okay, yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
What do you think about Miss Preacher and kind of her role at this point? And I was kind of going a little deeper and thinking about what that could symbolize in relation to fertility. What are your thoughts?
I think that a big theme here that we haven't even gotten to yet is sort of generational trauma and curses. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be layers of and I think when I was going through infertility, I felt like, am I cursed? Did I do something in another life that made it so I'm barren? Right? And I think while they don't come out and say it in those ways, that does feel like what some of the thematic, symbolic characters represent. Like the fertility doctor is a gynecologist in an older time when he was younger, and there's a different woman there. And then Miss Preacher comes and says she had to give her baby up for some reason. And so is there then a connection to Anna's family and Anna's infertility, or it actually is the husband's side of the family and his curse that might be on the family? And it just made me think a lot about generational trauma, because there's also that one very random scene with the queen and her sister that we're just supposed to know it's another time. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking there was Queen Anne or Anna and Queen Victoria, and her name is Anna Victoria. So I don't know if there's meant to be that is her in a different life, or that is her karma, or that is some kind of generational lineage. But I definitely was seeking that in each episode.
Wow, you were very perceptive. I did not even put that together, and I have watched it twice over. So good on you for finding that.
This is, again, being married to a filmmaker. You're constantly digging deep for other stuff that you might not see on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt like, again, towards the end of the shows that we've watched thus far, again, initially, Miss Preacher, I honestly wasn't even sure initially if she was a real, I guess, person.
Same, right.
I kind of was just again, is she imagining her? What's the deal with her? But I think essentially what I really thought Miss Preacher's role was, or her relation to real life fertility, was almost the fear or your personal fears that are haunting you throughout this process. She's always there. She's popping up with you when you're in your fertility treatments at the center. She's coming up for you at home. She's telling you, I guess, I'm assuming she wrote the don't do it, Anna. Like, don't go through this process. Just putting these seeds of doubt out there and just kind of always popping up when you least expect it or want her to be around.
Right.
So,
and even in the beginning, I thought she might not also be real. She might just be the figment of Anna's imagination. But then we learn she knows Anna's mother-in-law. Or I don't know if they know it. Yeah, they know each other from another time. It's unclear how. It doesn't seem like that's the first time they've met. So then that had me thinking that the curse was on the husband.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think, again, they mentioned at the end something about there's some aspect with his ex who I guess was part of some sort of cult they allude to, that they're angry with him, so they want to punish him in some form or fashion. And he seems unaware of the situation. So again, Miss Preacher at this point is trying to almost look out for Anna and doesn't want what happened to her to happen to Anna, which we don't fully know what that is yet at this point in time.
And by the way, quick side note, the B12 shots that Siobhan, which is Kim Kardashian's character, also look like blood and are also red.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
They could be, it might be that they're supposed to look like blood, which I get.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was when it was like hammered home for me. I was like, oh, they're red.
Yeah. And I thought a little bit like, is this playing into this, all of these ideas when we're trying to conceive about like taking supplements and how important they are, yet they're kind of scary because we don't really know 100% how they're going to affect our body. I think that might be playing into that common practice as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They are red, and I'm sure they're red for a reason now. Yeah. What about the ladies in black? We already said that they're Miss Ashley, we think, but did you think that there might be anything symbolism with them in particular, or what their kind of role is at this point?
I mean, they just seem like doomsday. They represent doomsday to me. Although in the real world, if it's the same character or actresses, they actually clean up the mess. So I don't know. What did you think? I more just saw them as doomsday or bad news bears. But then when I saw them again, I went back to this generational trauma and like karma thing because and I think I'm right, but I might be wrong. When I saw them in modern day as part of Siobhan's team, and we're not 100% sure yet, that's kind of how it ended. We don't know what Siobhan's end game is, and that they work for her, and that they also work in the past for the queen, but they come to take her baby. So for me, it was like they represent like the karmic destiny of whatever ruins the pregnancy or ruins the baby.
Yeah. Yeah. You are a little more detailed than how I'm seeing it. I'm just seeing it as general, almost like infertility in general. So it's there, it's taking your baby. It's this dark, almost curse that's surrounding you. And just, again, taking the baby for their own needs in a way. So that's kind of very more general what I'm seeing them as. But you're right. As far as Siobhan too, initially I was like, oh, she's such a good friend, let me be there for you. Let me support you through whatever. And then we're learning a little bit more about like her role possibly in this. At the end of the 5th episode, she's talking to I think it's a producer guy, Hamish, and saying, again, Hamish is like, oh, you gave me this script, which again, Anna's the star of. Where did it come from? All of a sudden it's winning all these awards. You say don't ask questions. So it leads me to believe that obviously she is selling, some aspect of maybe Anna's child or her soul or something in order to have success.
And then I agree. And that had me thinking, especially when those 2 women in black went and took the queen's baby, we say like, I'll give you my firstborn if blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, she, this queen made a deal with the devil. She would give the firstborn if, let's say, she becomes queen. So she becomes queen and then the devil shows up to take the firstborn per their deal. So I had the similar feeling that maybe since Siobhan, and Anna met through infertility, Siobhan maybe made a deal with the devil to give her firstborn, but then she cannot get pregnant, so she has to give somebody else's. But again, I might be like crazy overthinking it.
No, I think you're right on track, but we have our eye on you, Siobhan. So,
Yep.
All right, Abby. So, what predictions do you think might be around the corner, or where do you think this show might be going? I know it's hard to tell right now, but love to know your thoughts.
I think that there is a curse. I'm going to go with the curse on the husband, who, by the way, I think is mostly very good, and I love that actor. I think there's a curse on his family, potentially his mother. But see, then I also think Siobhan, it might be a curse on Siobhan where she promised the firstborn. And since she can't have a firstborn, she has to sacrifice someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't think that baby's going to go into the arms of Anna and her husband, Dex. That's all I got. What about you?
Yeah, I think that is not her actual baby anymore. I do not believe that is some sort of a demon child, dark spirit. I don't know what, but yeah, I don't believe that that is her baby anymore. And I do think, again, Siobhan, unfortunately, probably sold her soul or sold Anna's baby, basically. I'm not 100% sure if she fully knows, like, exactly to me, like, what the extent of what she promised. I think maybe she's a little clueless exactly what that means. But, that's my thought on that. And I do think that there's something going on with Sonia, the painter who looks exactly like her husband's ex-wife. I think it's something like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know if it is the ex-wife. Maybe she came back to life and now she's vengeful or wants Dex back. And that's her baby in some way. I don't really know with that one. But
yeah, there needs to be some follow through with that piece of the storyline for sure.
Yeah.
Although it's not really his, well, it is his former wife, but she dies.
Yes,
his first wife died. It's not like they're divorced. And so that also makes me feel like it's potentially part of this curse. Because also his mother is involved. So like there has to be a through line there.
Yeah.
With her storyline as well.
Yeah. Well, lots to see, lots of excitement to come. I will be awaiting the release date of the next set of episodes. And yeah, it's unfortunate they're leaving us in suspense, but apparently I was reading that it is because there was the, I think it was the SAG strike.
Yeah, everything had to stop.
Yeah, so there's not normally this long of a break between episodes, but hey, I'll take these 5 for now.
Totally.
Watching them.
They're probably like the minute it was a writer strike and a SAG strike, the minute they ended, they probably started shooting again, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to keep hearing your thoughts on that for when those next episodes come out.
Can't wait. Cannot wait. We can reconvene and discuss what we thought was going to happen and whether it really happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the meantime, Abby, is there any place that people can get to follow you or, see what you're working on?
Yeah, my podcast is called The Fertility Check. You can find me there. You can DM me there on Instagram. My company is In Circle Fertility. You can find me there on Instagram or my website. And then I'm personally Abby Feeder, also very active on Instagram. I love chatting with people. I love talking pop culture. I love talking fertility. So this put everything I love into one place.
I'm so glad you enjoyed our conversation today because I did too. So yeah, I will put all of her information and contact information in the show notes for you guys. And I guess until next time.
Until next time.
Thank you for allowing me to share these stories, information, and tips with you, or really just allowing me to connect with you on a subject that's so dear and important to your life. I really hope that somewhere out there I was able to reach one of you and to let you know that, again, you're not alone on this journey. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and do me a solid and share this with your friends or anyone that you think might benefit from hearing this. Also, I'd love it if you could leave a rating or review from wherever you're listening. If you have any questions or you want to share anything about what you heard today with us, please leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify. And for a deeper dive on today's episode, bonus content, and to connect with others in this space, I invite you to join Tru Fertility Tribe Facebook group. And last but not least, let's be friends on Instagram, where I post almost daily. You can find me at Tru Fertility. Wishing you all baby dust. Till next time. Bye.